Oh, here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my presentation about maintaining Snowflake reporting data with the help of Google Analytics and FME. To start a bit about myself, my name is Roggisch. I am a GIS and system integration consultant. I've been working in the industry for nearly 20 years now. I've been using FME since 2007, and I have late last year started to work for Locus. Right, so the structure of the presentation looks like this. I'll introduce the two platforms at a high level. So what is Snowflake? What is Google Analytics? I'll talk a bit about why integrate the two. So that's just the detail. That's some details about the customer project that sparked the idea for this presentation. I'll show you an example workspace. You will notice that it's quite basic because I'm not doing a lot of data manipulation in there. The focus is on how to connect to Google Analytics and Snowflake rather than data transformations. And all those of you who just attended Kieran's session before, you'll probably see a few similarities there. So I really enjoyed his session because it's very similar to what I've been doing for this. You can ask questions in the chat. If I can't answer them during the presentation, I'll contact you after, or we'll work out how to get that information to you. Right, so what is Snowflake? So it's both the name of a company as well as their flagship product. The company was founded in the United States in 2012, and the first iteration of the product was released in 2014. It is a cloud-based data management and analytics platform made available as software as a service. And this means you get usage-based pricing, either pay-as-you-go or prepaid credits, in the same way you get that from other platforms like Azure, for instance. It comes with fully managed infrastructure, which means all the usual non-functionals are taken care of for you. So that means security, resilience, and scalability. So the things that are always implicitly being asked for, but that are quite often missing from requirements documents, interestingly enough. It can run on the Azure, AWS, or Google clouds. Now, the interesting bit there is that you can't really, as far as I know, deploy Snowflake to your own tenant in those cloud environments. But you do get a choice of cloud provider and data center region to deploy to when you sign up. So that way you can host it close to the data you want to import. Or you can deploy it somewhere convenient. And then, if you've got an Azure tenant, you can create resources like storage accounts near the Snowflake deployment so that your data doesn't have to travel too far. That's the same as FME Server. It likes to live close to the data that it needs to process. Snowflake supports a variety of workloads such as data pipelines, data warehouses, and data sharing, both internally within your organization as well as externally. And it can store structured and semi-structured data. So you can work with tables that most of us are very familiar with, and then it can also load JSON files as is, or even XML, and query that data too. Notable features from my own limited point of view, I haven't been working with it too long. It's really easy to use. Everything seems to be done via SQL commands, including the configuration of warehouses. And a warehouse in Snowflake is basically a fully managed virtual machine that you need to perform data loading and analysis. Another thing that's really easy is data recovery. So Snowflake calls this feature time travel, and it can be used to do a point-in-time restore of data that was deleted or overwritten, as well as restoring database objects such as tables, for instance, that might have been deleted by accident. I think the minimum amount of time you can travel backwards is 24 hours, and depending on the service tier you sign up to, the retention period can be up to 90 days, so that gives you a pretty massive safety net. Here's a diagram that I pulled from the Snowflake website that gives you a diagram of what I've just spoken about and a bit more. So at the bottom, you see the the cloud providers that you can deploy Snowflake to. The big box in the center is the platform itself with the parts that make it unique. And then at the top, you see the services that are user-facing, that you can interact with if you have a subscription. What is Google Analytics? Most of you have probably heard of it or are actively using it, so I'll just give you a Wikipedia summary that you see there. Google Analytics is a web analytics service offered by Google that tracks and reports website traffic. And obviously, Google Analytics data can help organizations improve their online presence through insights such as where are visitors based, how do they access the website, i.e. mobile versus desktop browsers, how long do they stay on the website, and things like that. Google Analytics has been around since 2005, and it's probably the most widely used web traffic analytics solution on the internet. So WordPress, for instance, if the most popular website builder on the internet has plugins for Google Analytics to make it really easy to set that up. Now, one of the hardest things that I found when working with the Google Analytics API was to figure out which API and version of the API to use. There are quite a few, and the documentation isn't as clear as I would have hoped. So if you ever need to use Google Analytics yourself, spend some time working through this early on so that you don't have to rebuild later. Just for a bit of context, the one with the green arrow against it is the version that we ended up using for this project that I'm going to speak about next. Why integrate the two? Well, in our case, Locus were asked by the Department of Conservation here in New Zealand to assist with a strategic project they're working on at the moment, which is part of the larger Digital Strategy 2020 program of work. The goal of this particular project is to implement what they call the Modern Data Platform, or MDP for short, which is a cloud-based data warehouse implemented in Snowflake. The main purpose of the MDP is to provide a single source of truth for business intelligence and reporting data across the organization, and also automate updates from a multitude of data sources so that data analysts can find everything in one place in a timely manner. So now I'm going to show you a very simple FME workspace that is aiming to just give you an idea of how you can connect to Google Analytics as well as Snowflake. So you'll just see here on the far left, there's just a way to kick things off. Then there's a test filter in there that's just being used in this development workspace to decide whether we want to run it for named web connections, which you see at the top, or a Google service account, which you see at the bottom. I won't explain the details of how to configure the Google platform for the two login mechanisms I'll talk about here, because that would take too much time. But if you'd like to know more, then you can email myself or anyone at Locus, and we'll provide you with more information around that. So like I said, the first way to connect to Google Analytics is via a named web connection. A lot of you may know this from other servers already. For instance, ArcGIS Online follows the same pattern. In the HTTP caller, you define your core parameters like the URL up here. In this case, it's a post call, so that's your HTTP method. And then here we have a post body. The details don't really matter. It just matters that you need to put this together as per the API specification that Google have documentation for. And then at the bottom here, this is the important bit. This is where you set your authentication. One of the options here is web connection. And as you can see, I've already got one in here that I've configured earlier, which uses my Gmail account. If you haven't set this up before, then you'll need to do a bit more work to configure a web service first that allows you to then create a named web connection. To do that, you go to Tools, FME Options, Web Connections, and then down here in the right corner, you have the Manage Services button. As you can see, and a lot of you would have seen this already, there are lots of services that FME ships with, but Google Analytics isn't one of them. The only reason you see this in here, in my case, is because I've already configured it. So that's why it shows like an out-of-the-box one. But usually what you would do is you would scroll down here, and find the Google Analytics web service template. And that was made available. I think that's a community contribution. So someone from the FME community has uploaded this to the FME Hub, and you can download it from there. And as you can see over here on the right, it comes with detailed instructions for how to create an app in Google and then configure the web service to use it. Once you've configured the web service, you can create your named web connection, log into your Gmail account, give consent for the app to use your account, and then you're good to go. So once you've done all this, a call to the Google Analytics API to retrieve data can be done in this one single transformer. Again, those of you who were present at Kieran's presentation, this will look very familiar to you. So this is the other way of doing it. I should say that this technique up here is really useful for when you run workspaces and desktop. So if that's your main use case, then I would suggest you use that because it's really nice and simple. In our case with this Department of Conservation project, though, the workspace needed to run on FME server, and there were a few problems with this particular approach. So the ICT team didn't really like named web connections for a few reasons. Firstly, they depend on named users, aka Gmail accounts, and users can, of course, leave the organization or change their password, which would then break integrations in FME server. Also, when you create an app in the Google Cloud Console that represents FME, so that you can enable OAuth for your FME workspace, it is created with a publishing status of test. That's just a Google platform thing. And this means that your OAuth refresh token is only valid for a week. And that means that you would have to manually reauthorize the connection in FME server once a week. That's not ideal for automated integrations, obviously. So that is easy to forget, and then it hits the wall after a certain amount of time. Long-lived refresh tokens can be enabled by publishing the Google app, but ICT in this case didn't want us to do this because it wasn't clear what the implications were in terms of visibility of the app outside the organization. So it doesn't necessarily mean that anyone outside of Doc would have been able to use the app because, of course, they would have had to have a Gmail account with appropriate access. But it was just a matter of not even wanting to show that in case it shows up somewhere in an apps catalog or whatever that is. So that's why we figured out a different approach to this. And after a bit of research and testing, we decided to use a Google Service account instead. This is also Google's recommended authentication mechanism for server-to-server integration, by the way. So that's that's in line with best practice recommendations from Google themselves. A Google Service account is conceptually very similar to a Windows domain account that you would use to run services like the FME Server Engine service, for instance. It's not tied to a person, so it's not a Gmail account, but it can be given access to resources just like a named user account would. A user account doesn't have a password, but instead it has a client ID and a private key. And those two can then be used in FME to authenticate against the Google platform. And just to show you what that looks like over here. So this is the execution mode that's just needed to flick between those execution modes. And then you've got your Google Service account. It looks like an email, but it isn't. And then you've got your private key in here that you just download from the Google Cloud Console. Now, to use a service account and authenticate against Google, you need to create a JSON Web Token or JOT and cryptographically sign it. So that's a way to encrypt it using the private key. And FME currently can't do this out of the box, but Python can do it with fairly little effort. So all you need to do is install a suitable Python package, and there are a few available. That is able to create and sign a JOT or JSON Web Token. And then you install that Python package on your local FME desktop machine and add these lines of code inside a Python caller transformer. So really, it's just 6 lines. Again, I'm happy to share this with you if you're interested. There isn't really much happening, so you get a handle on the private key that was supplied via an attribute, and then you need to set a few things like start time and end time for the validity of the token that you're going to create. And then there's just a certain way that you need to create this. It's basically a JSON object that you create. Then you use the JSON library that we've used here to encode that token, and then you simply attach that to your feature and output it, and then it's available downstream. A word on the Python module we use. So we used one that's called JSON. And the reason for that is because all its dependencies can simply be copied to FME server and will work without requiring installation. So there's a more popular package or one that's more well known called PyJot. And during testing, we found that there's actually quite a lot involved in making that work, not so much in desktop, but to lift that into FME server, there's quite a lot of work that isn't easy to do. Whereas with JSON, it's just a bunch of folders and files that you upload into a folder on FME server, and it works. So once you've got your JOT, you need to then call the Google API to swap the JOT for an access token, which is the same thing that the named web connection goes and retrieves for you. And once you unpack that, you're then ready to call the Google reporting API, just like I showed you with the named web connection. So this is the same call, same URL there. It's a post body. You've got your, it's a post method. There's the same upload body. The only difference is that instead of using the authentication section down here, we just send the access token that we retrieved from Google inside the standard authorization header. And from that point onwards, it's the same as the other process. And now you can see there's quite a bit more involved here with this process, but based on Kieran's presentation before, it would be very easy to just collapse this thing down into a single transformer or a single object if you created a custom transformer from it. So that leaves the connection to Snowflake, and the beauty of it is that there's literally nothing to say. So Snowflake has been built into FME just like any other database system that you might have used in the past. So it works pretty much exactly the same way as connecting to a SQL Server instance. All you need to do is you create a database connection, named database connection in here. You've got Snowflake as one of the selections here on the list. And then you simply need to fill in the details, give it a name, fill in all these details, which are very well documented in the Snowflake documentation. And once you've done that, you can then access Snowflake and interact with it in the same way you would any other database system, really. When you look at the feature operations here, they will look very familiar to you. So that's the same thing you would see for SQL Server. And then you can also use the same operations for table handling that you find in other database management systems. So if you would like to give this a go yourself, then I recommend you sign up to a trial account. So that, to me, in terms of working with Snowflake, that was the biggest obstacle to overcome, was to just sign up for a trial account. You get, I think, $400 worth of credit and 30 days to use it, and then you can just have a play with it. So that was the FME workspace. If you're interested, I've just collated a list of resources that were used in the creation of this workspace. So that's just how to use the Google Analytics API and also how to authenticate. So there's some really good information there. How to sign up for a Snowflake trial account, documentation, which is, by the way, really good. And then a link to the FME Hub for the if you do want to go with the named web connection instead, for the web service template, and finally the Python JSON Python package. And that was it from me already. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. I just can I ask you to remove your share screen so I can put a slide up? Thank you. That's awesome. Give me 1 second. Okay, so that pretty much concludes today, and I really think today has actually been an amazing start to this world tour. So I hope that all of you do as well. The level of engagement throughout the day from all of you has just been really good, and we really appreciate that. It's always great to get questions and comments coming through. I want to quickly use this time just to thank Mike Obadries, Callum, Gavin, Kieran, and Jan for coming along today and presenting their work for us. I think that we can all agree that the presentations we've seen were really exceptional and hopefully go a long way for you to apply some of that in your day-to-day work as well. So thank you again to all of those guys, and we'll be sending along some thank you gifts to the guest speakers in the coming days. I just want to have a quick look at tomorrow. So we have, if I can get onto it, just 1 second. There we go. So as you can see, tomorrow is a fairly jam-packed day with customer presentations. So we know that people really like to see those. So if you haven't registered for any of the sessions yet, please jump on and have a look and register for the ones that interest you. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And we look forward to welcoming you all back tomorrow. Take care.